the Taliban has done so well in Afghanistan because they were providing police protection to impoverished communities, many times through fear, many times through retribution. But the Taliban was the sheriff. And when the Taliban wasn't the sheriff, there was rampant corruption. And even when the Taliban was the sheriff, there was rampant corruption. We learned all of these lessons in Iraq as we tried to move into the country to get rid of a despot, a bad guy that was destabilizing the region. And we learned the hard way that if we didn't focus on establishing a rule of law, on not just going after the bad guys, but leaving a military and a police presence that could stabilize the way of life that most people on this planet want. They want to be able to take care of their kids, feed their families, and not worry that they're going to be killed on the way to work. So, that's why this hearing is so important. Training the police in Afghanistan is part of our military mission. It is as important as anything else we are doing in that nation right now. It's as important as training the military. It's as important as hunting down the terrorists and killing them. So, what has happened in that regard? And it is an unbelievably incompetent story of contracting. For 8 years, we have been supposedly training the police in Afghanistan. And here's what we've done. We've flushed $6 billion. $6 billion. Now, am I exaggerating? Let me quote the general in charge of training the police in Afghanistan. This is what General Caldwell said, and I quote, "It's inconceivable, but in fact, for 8 years, we weren't training the police." He went on to say that essentially we were giving them uniforms. No one had control of these contracts. No one agency. This has been a game of pass-off. The ultimate recipe for disaster is not having one single agency with clear line of authority in charge, able to make sure the mission is accomplished with efficiency, effectiveness, and that money is not walking away. None of that happened for 8 years. I'll give you one anecdote. Early this year, the Italians showed up. This has been an international effort, very unorganized, but nonetheless an international effort. The Italians showed up. And the Afghan volunteers that had volunteered to be on these police departments were posting horrible scores on the shooting range. They were the gang that couldn't shoot straight. And there was this wringing of hands. What are we going to do about these Afghan police officers that we're training that can't hit the side of a barn? The first part of this year, the Italian paramilitary came in and began looking at the problem. Are you ready for this? What the problem was? Nobody had checked the sights on the AK-47s and the M16s they were shooting. They were out of line. So we were paying somebody to teach these people how to shoot these weapons, and nobody that we were paying had bothered to check the sights as to whether or not they were in line. So these guys were using the sights that weren't even in line with where they were shooting. Now, that's one example, but I think it's pretty illustrative. These contractors, for whatever reason, didn't have anybody who was saying had to check the sights when the scores were coming back bad, year after year after year after year. Their scores have dramatically improved. Now, don't get me wrong, there are major challenges here. These people are showing up to become police officers without being able to read or write. Most of them have only seen a role model of police officer that's not the role model we're looking for. We're asking them to change many things about their culture and the way they operate. This is a hard job. And don't get me wrong, I get it that it's a hard job. All the more reason that we need clear line of accountability. We have an audit that has done, and that's going to be the subject of the hearing to a large extent today. And I want to make sure, as we talk about this, that we know that there are, in fact, a reason why people should be angry today. This new joint IG report that just came out in February, and we're going to talk about it extensively during the hearing, talks about the problem of this division of responsibility between the Defense Department and the State Department, and how badly this has gone in terms of accountability and authority. Now, if this, frankly, was the first time that we'd heard this, then maybe we shouldn't have a full-blown hearing. We've identified the problem. Now you can get to work. Now here's the rest of the story. 2005, GAO reported that Department of State had not developed a plan for when, how, or what cost the training or equipping of the AMP would be accomplished. 2006, DOS, the Department of State, and Defense Inspectors Generals found management of the DynCorp contract to be problematic and require more effective coordination between Department of State and CSTICA. And I started talking in acronyms. It means I've been here too long. That is essentially the division of the military that's in charge of overseeing these contracts. 2008, GAO found State and Defense still had not developed a coordinated detailed plan for completing and sustaining AMP force. And DoD Defense IG reported that CSTICA, the military department in charge, had not developed training programs. How about contracting officers? Department of State, we found in this 210 report that contracting officers were not providing adequate surveillance. Guess what? 2005, they said that. 2006, they said that. Cigar, who frankly has not completed enough reports that are meaningful in terms of the oversight capacity of our government, they even found in 2009 there was a problem. Curriculum. The current report says there's a problem with curriculum. Guess what? 2006, they said the same thing. 2006, State and DoD IG reported obstacles to establish a fully professional Afghan national police, including illiterate recruits, a history of low pay, pervasive corruption, on and on and on. In other words, this is the third or fourth time that people who check into our government have said, hello, it's not working, you're not doing a good job. Now, this doesn't compute. Essential to our mission, men and women dying for the cause, and we can't get basic contract oversight of this function under control. So this is going to be a tough one, and there are going to be some tough questions because there's no excuse for this to go on any further.